What if I told you that being too nice is the very reason you feel ignored, undervalued, and emotionally exhausted with men? You answer texts instantly. You understand his excuses. You forgive silence. You lower your standards just to keep peace. And yet, the respect never comes. Today, we're breaking the illusion that niceness creates love, because in reality, niceness without boundaries creates invisibility. This speech will change how men see you by changing how you see yourself. Niceness teaches men how to treat you long before they ever decide how much effort to give. From the very first interaction, your responses, your tolerance, your emotional reactions, and even your silence are being observed. Men are not confused about what is acceptable. They are educated by behavior. When you excuse disrespect in the name of being nice, you silently rewrite the rules of the relationship. You may believe you are being patient or understanding, but what you are really doing is setting a standard that says your needs are flexible, optional, or negotiable. When a man cancels plans at the last minute and you respond with warmth and reassurance instead of disappointment, you send a message that your time is not valuable. He may not consciously think this, but behaviorally, he learns that there is no consequence for poor planning. Niceness becomes a cushion that protects him from accountability. Over time, this pattern repeats, and what began as a single canceled plan turns into a habit of inconsistency. Every time you answer immediately while he takes hours or days, you reinforce an imbalance. Your quick replies communicate availability without limits. You may think responsiveness shows interest, but excessive availability removes curiosity and urgency. Men often value what they fear losing, not what they can access anytime. When niceness keeps you always reachable, it teaches him that effort is unnecessary to keep you engaged. When you forgive too quickly without change, you teach him that apologies are enough. Words become substitutes for actions because your niceness allows emotional shortcuts. He learns that saying sorry resets everything, regardless of whether his behavior improves. This slowly erodes your trust and self-respect, while he remains comfortable repeating the same patterns. Niceness also teaches men how to prioritize you. If you always adjust your schedule to fit his, he learns that you will rearrange your life for his convenience. He does not need to plan ahead, consider your availability, or respect your commitments. Your flexibility becomes a silent agreement that his time matters more than yours. When you suppress your disappointment to avoid tension, you teach him that your feelings are secondary. Men are highly responsive to emotional feedback, but only when it is clear and consistent. Niceness that hides discomfort removes important emotional signals. Without those signals, he continues behavior that hurts you, unaware or unconcerned, because there is no visible cost. Over time, this dynamic creates emotional laziness. He stops checking in, stops asking how you feel, stops noticing changes in your tone or energy. Not because he is incapable, but because niceness trained him that emotional awareness is optional. When a man never experiences resistance, he never learns consideration. Niceness often shows up as over-explaining. You justify your feelings instead of stating them. You soften your words so much that your message loses strength. Men interpret this as uncertainty, not kindness. When your boundaries sound negotiable, they become negotiable. He learns that pushing a little further will not cost him anything. When you tolerate inconsistency, you normalize it. Mixed signals, hot and cold behavior, and emotional withdrawal become part of the relationship rhythm. Niceness convinces you to wait, hope, and understand instead of addressing the issue. He learns that stability is something you will provide even when he does not. Niceness also teaches men how much emotional labor you will carry alone. If you are always the one initiating conversations, resolving conflicts, and maintaining connection, he learns to step back. Your effort fills the gap his absence creates. Over time, he becomes a passive participant while you become emotionally exhausted. When you accept minimal effort with gratitude, you lower the bar. A late text, a vague compliment, or last-minute attention feels like something to appreciate rather than question. Niceness reframes crumbs as gifts. Men adapt to the level of appreciation they receive. If little effort earns big emotional rewards, there is no motivation to do more. Niceness teaches men whether they need to grow. Growth often comes from discomfort, from realizing behavior has consequences. When niceness removes discomfort, growth stops. A man who never faces emotional boundaries has no reason to mature within the relationship. When you stay silent about repeated disappointments, you teach him that silence equals acceptance. Silence is not neutrality, it is permission. Over time, unspoken resentment builds inside you while he believes everything is fine. This disconnect deepens because niceness prevented honest communication. Niceness can also distort attraction. Attraction thrives on mutual respect, not self-sacrifice. When a man senses that you will always bend, he subconsciously stops valuing your presence. Not because you lack worth, but because your behavior does not require him to rise. Each small act of niceness compounds into a long-term pattern. One ignored boundary becomes many. One excused behavior becomes a precedent. Men do not suddenly decide to disrespect. They follow the path that has been quietly laid for them. When niceness replaces clarity, relationships lose structure. Structure is not control, it is guidance. Men often respond best when expectations are clear and consistent. Niceness that avoids clarity creates confusion, and confusion leads to emotional distance. The most dangerous part of niceness is how invisible it feels while it is happening. You believe you are being loving, supportive, and patient. You don't realize you are slowly teaching someone how little they need to invest to keep you around. As time passes, resentment grows because your internal needs remain unmet. You begin to feel unseen, unheard, and undervalued. Meanwhile, he feels comfortable, unaware of the imbalance, because niceness shielded him from the truth. Niceness also affects how men speak to you. When you allow dismissive tones, jokes at your expense, or subtle disrespect without addressing it, you teach him that your emotional boundaries are soft. Language shapes perception, and tolerated language becomes acceptable language. When you prioritize harmony over honesty, you sacrifice authenticity. Men sense when a woman is not fully expressing herself. This creates emotional distance, even if there is frequent communication. Niceness replaces depth with surface-level peace. Over time, the relationship becomes one-sided, not because he demanded it, but because niceness offered it. You gave more than was required, and he adapted to receiving more than he earned. Niceness teaches men what effort looks like in your world. If effort is optional, optional becomes standard. If effort is required, required becomes normal. The lesson is always behavioral, never verbal. When you finally reach a breaking point and express anger or withdrawal, he is shocked. He believes the relationship changed suddenly, unaware that niceness masked dissatisfaction for a long time. This is why men often say, "I didn't see it coming." Niceness without boundaries does not create safety, it creates imbalance. And imbalance slowly erodes emotional connection, attraction, and respect. Each interaction is a lesson. Each response is instruction. Each tolerance is permission. Men do not guess how to treat you, they learn. And what they learn depends entirely on what you allow, what you reinforce, and what you quietly accept under the label of being nice. Men respect boundaries, not sacrifice, even though many women are taught the opposite from an early age. Sacrifice is often praised as love, as patience, as emotional maturity, but in relationships with men, constant self-sacrifice quietly erodes respect. When you give up your needs, time, or emotional comfort to keep a man happy, you may believe you are strengthening the bond, yet what you are actually doing is removing the structure that makes respect possible. Boundaries communicate self-worth without requiring explanation. They say, "This is where I end and you begin." Men understand this language clearly because it mirrors how they navigate the world themselves. In work, competition, and personal goals, boundaries are non-negotiable. When a woman lacks them, it creates confusion. Confusion does not create closeness, it creates imbalance. Sacrifice teaches men that your needs are flexible while theirs are fixed. Each time you adjust your standards to avoid conflict, you send the message that your comfort is secondary. Over time, he unconsciously internalizes this hierarchy. Respect fades not because he is cruel, but because the dynamic no longer requires him to consider you as an equal force. Boundaries create emotional gravity. They introduce consequence, and consequence is what anchors respect. When a man knows there is a line he cannot cross without losing access to you, he becomes more attentive. Sacrifice removes consequence. It tells him that no matter what he does, you will stay, adjust, and forgive. Many women confuse boundaries with ultimatums, but they are not the same. Boundaries are internal decisions, not threats. They are not about controlling a man's behavior. They are about controlling your response to it. Men respect this because it reflects strength rather than dependency. When you sacrifice your truth to keep peace, The peace is artificial. Men sense when a woman is suppressing herself, even if they benefit from it. This suppression creates emotional distance because authenticity is missing. Respect cannot grow in an environment where one person is shrinking. Boundaries teach men how to show up. They clarify expectations without drama. When a man knows what behavior is acceptable and what is not, he can choose whether to meet those standards. Sacrifice robs him of that choice by silently tolerating behavior you resent. Respect is built on predictability and consistency. Boundaries provide both. When your reactions align with your values every time, men learn to trust your standards. Sacrifice creates inconsistency. One day you accept something, the next day you feel hurt by it. This inconsistency weakens respect. Men often test limits, not out of malice, but to understand structure. Boundaries give structure. Sacrifice removes it. When there are no limits, men either disengage emotionally or unconsciously dominate the dynamic. Neither outcome leads to mutual respect. Sacrifice often comes from fear of loss. Boundaries come from confidence in self. Men are instinctively drawn to confidence because it signals stability. A woman who can walk away from disrespect is more respected than one who stays through it. When you sacrifice your standards, you also sacrifice attraction. Attraction thrives on polarity, and polarity requires two grounded individuals. Boundaries maintain your groundedness. Sacrifice dissolves it, turning connection into obligation rather than desire. Boundaries protect your emotional energy. When you conserve your energy instead of overgiving, men feel the difference. They become more mindful, more present, because your energy is no longer unlimited. Unlimited access reduces value. Limited access increases awareness. Sacrifice can make men comfortable, but comfort is not respect. Comfort breeds complacency. Boundaries introduce healthy tension, and tension keeps respect alive. It reminds a man that the relationship requires effort and mindfulness. When a woman enforces boundaries calmly without anger or apology, it shifts the power dynamic. Power does not mean dominance. It means self-authority. Men respect self-authority because it mirrors their own internal hierarchy. Boundaries also protect men from themselves. They prevent patterns of laziness, entitlement, and emotional avoidance. A man who respects a woman's boundaries often becomes a better version of himself within the relationship. Sacrifice teaches men that love means endurance. Boundaries teach men that love means mutual care. Only one of these creates long-term respect. When you stop sacrificing and start setting boundaries, men may initially resist. Resistance is not rejection, it is adjustment. A man who values you will adapt. A man who doesn't will fall away. In both cases, respect becomes clear. Boundaries eliminate resentment before it begins. When your needs are honored consistently, you do not carry silent anger. Men sense this emotional clarity and respond with more consideration. Sacrifice invites entitlement. Boundaries invite partnership. Men respect partnerships because they require participation, not consumption. When you hold boundaries, you teach men how to love you properly. You remove guesswork and replace it with clarity. Clarity is attractive because it reduces emotional chaos. Respect is not something you ask for, it is something you demonstrate through what you allow. Boundaries demonstrate value. Sacrifice hides it. Men do not rise for women who collapse for them. They rise for women who stand. And every time you choose a boundary over self-betrayal, you reinforce the message that respect is the price of access. Over-niceness often signals low self-value, not because kindness is weakness, but because excessive niceness usually comes from fear rather than confidence. When a woman is rooted in her self-worth, her kindness has boundaries, selectivity, and discernment. When niceness becomes constant, automatic, and unconditional, it stops being a choice and becomes a coping mechanism. Men are highly sensitive to this difference even if they cannot consciously explain it. When you overgive, over-explain, and over-accommodate, you reveal an internal belief that you must earn love rather than expect it naturally. This belief leaks through behavior. Men read it as insecurity, not devotion. The more you try to prove your value through niceness, the more you unintentionally suggest that your value is not already established. Low self-value is often communicated through urgency. You rush to reply, rush to please, rush to smooth things over. This urgency tells a man that losing him feels dangerous to you. And when someone senses that they are essential to your emotional stability, respect quietly diminishes. Desire needs freedom, desperation suffocates it. Over-niceness also shows up in the inability to say no without guilt. When your yes comes from fear of disapproval instead of genuine desire, it weakens your presence. Men do not respect compliance that lacks conviction. They respect clarity. A woman who says no comfortably signals self-trust. A woman who says yes while resenting it signals internal conflict. When you constantly seek reassurance through niceness, you teach men that your confidence is externally sourced. Compliments, attention, and validation become emotional fuel you depend on. This dependency shifts the dynamic. Instead of two grounded individuals choosing each other, the relationship becomes a source of emotional regulation for one side. Over-niceness often includes minimizing your own needs. You say things like, "It's fine, don't worry about it," or "I understand," when you actually feel hurt or disappointed. Men notice the mismatch between your words and your energy. This incongruence weakens trust and lowers perceived value because authenticity is missing. Men associate self-value with standards. When your standards are unclear or easily compromised, they assume you do not value yourself highly. This assumption affects how much effort they give. Effort follows standards. When standards disappear, effort declines naturally. Excessive niceness often hides a fear of being seen as difficult. But strength is not difficulty, it is definition. A woman with self-value does not fear being misunderstood because she understands herself. Over-niceness tries to manage perception instead of standing in truth, and men sense this lack of inner grounding. When you tolerate behavior that makes you uncomfortable, just to maintain connection, you teach men that access to you does not require emotional responsibility. This teaches them that you will absorb discomfort so they don't have to. Over time, this erodes both respect and attraction. Low self-value also appears when you over-justify your boundaries. Instead of stating what you want, you explain why you're allowed to want it. Men interpret over-explanation as uncertainty. Confidence does not require permission. The more you defend your needs, the less solid they appear. Over-niceness often replaces presence with performance. You become the easy, chill, or understanding woman rather than the authentic one. Men may enjoy the comfort, but comfort without depth does not inspire commitment. Value is felt through depth, not convenience. When you prioritize being liked over being respected, your behavior shifts subtly. You laugh at things that hurt you. You agree when you don't. You soften truths that need firmness. Men subconsciously register this as emotional self-abandonment, and self-abandonment lowers value in any relationship. Men are drawn to women who feel complete on their own. Over-niceness suggests incompleteness, a need to attach quickly, a fear of standing alone. This fear does not repel because men are cruel, it repels because it creates pressure. Pressure kills desire. When your identity becomes flexible to fit a man's preferences, your individuality fades. Men respect individuality because it signals strength and autonomy. Over-niceness dissolves individuality into accommodation, and accommodation without reciprocity becomes invisible. Low self-value is not loud, it is quiet. It shows up in what you allow, what you excuse, and what you endure. Over-niceness is often silent self-betrayal disguised as love. Men sense this betrayal, and while they may accept the benefits, they do not respect the cost. When you stop trying to earn worth through niceness, your energy shifts. You no longer give to be chosen, you give because you choose. This distinction changes how men experience you, because confidence does not chase connection, it attracts it. Over-niceness teaches men that your presence is negotiable. Self-value teaches them that your presence is a privilege. The difference is not in words, but in behavior repeated consistently over time. When your kindness comes from fullness rather than fear, it feels grounded, calm, and selective. Men respond to this with curiosity and effort. When niceness comes from insecurity, it feels anxious and excessive, and men respond with comfort instead of respect. Every moment of over-niceness is a message about how you see yourself. Men don't decide your value, but they do respond to the value you demonstrate through your standards, boundaries, and self-trust. Emotional availability must be earned because emotions are not casual resources. They are powerful connectors that shape attachment, trust, and influence. When a woman offers deep emotional access too quickly, without observing consistency, effort, or intention, she removes the natural progression that allows respect to develop. Men may enjoy the closeness, but enjoyment is not the same as valuing what they receive. When you share your fears, hopes, wounds, and insecurities, Before a man has shown reliability, you place emotional weight into untested hands. This is not openness, it is exposure without protection. Men often respond by becoming comfortable rather than careful. Comfort lowers mindfulness, and mindfulness is essential for respect. Emotional availability given freely can feel nourishing at first. B. It often leads to imbalance. You invest emotionally while he remains undecided. This creates a gap where you feel connected and he feels entertained. Men rarely value what they did not have to earn because earning creates attachment on their side, not just yours. Men bond through investment. Time, effort, and consistency create emotional attachment for them. When you provide emotional intimacy without requiring those investments, you reverse the natural bonding process. You bond deeply while he stays emotionally lighter, less anchored, and more detached. Early emotional openness can also blur discernment. When emotions are shared too soon, logic often steps aside. You may ignore red flags because emotional closeness creates a false sense of security. Men sense this and may unconsciously rely on your emotional availability instead of building genuine trust. When emotional access is earned, it carries weight. It becomes something meaningful, not something assumed. Men handle what feels valuable with more care. When emotions are always available, they lose their impact and become background noise rather than connection. Many women confuse emotional availability with authenticity. Authenticity does not mean immediate vulnerability, it means honest pacing. You can be genuine without revealing everything. Men respect women who know when to open and when to observe. Emotional availability without boundaries often leads to emotional labor. You become the listener, the support, or the healer. Men grow accustomed to receiving emotional regulation from you without offering it in return. This dynamic creates dependency without reciprocity. When emotions are earned, they become a reward, not a service. Men who feel they have earned your emotional trust tend to protect it. Protection is a form of respect. When emotional trust is free, it is often consumed without care. Oversharing too early can create false intimacy. Conversations feel deep, but connection remains shallow. Men may enjoy the emotional closeness without feeling responsibility for your emotional well-being. This leaves you feeling attached while he feels unburdened. Emotional pacing allows you to observe behavior over time. Consistency cannot be rushed. When you slow emotional availability, you give yourself space to evaluate whether a man deserves deeper access. This discernment protects your self-worth. Men respect emotional boundaries because they signal self-awareness. A woman who does not emotionally attach to potential prematurely demonstrates inner stability. Stability is attractive because it reduces emotional chaos and pressure. When emotional availability is earned, men often rise. They invest more, communicate more clearly, and become more intentional. Earning emotional access makes them feel involved in the connection rather than merely receiving it. Free emotional access can also create entitlement. A man may assume he deserves your emotional energy regardless of his EF. This entitlement reduces gratitude and increases complacency. Earning access prevents this pattern. Emotional availability should deepen with trust, not precede it. Trust is built through actions, not words. Men respect women who align their emotional openness with observed behavior rather than potential. When you hold emotional boundaries, you protect your inner world. Protection is not coldness, it is wisdom. Men respect wisdom because it signals experience and self-respect. Emotional availability given selectively creates depth. It allows connection to grow organically rather than explosively. Organic growth lasts because it is rooted in reality, not fantasy. Men often test emotional access unconsciously. When they see that your emotions are not easily accessed, they become more attentive. Attention is the beginning of effort, and effort is the foundation of respect. Earning emotional availability transforms the dynamic from consumption to contribution. Men shift from receiving to participating. Participation builds investment, and investment builds respect. When emotions are treated as valuable, they are handled with care. When they are treated as unlimited, they are handled casually. The difference lies not in the man, but in the access you provide. Emotional availability is powerful currency. When you spend it wisely, it enriches the connection. When you give it away freely, it loses its value. The depth of emotional connection a man feels is often purport. I owe now to what he had to do to earn it. Being nice often means avoiding conflict, not because conflict is inherently bad, but because many women have been conditioned to associate disagreement with rejection. From an early age, niceness is rewarded with approval, while assertiveness is labeled as difficult or aggressive. This conditioning follows women into romantic dynamics where staying agreeable feels safer than risking emotional distance. Over time, this avoidance of conflict becomes a habit that silently undermines respect. When you avoid conflict, you avoid clarity. Clarity is uncomfortable because it exposes differences, expectations, and limits. Niceness smooths over these edges, creating an illusion of harmony. But harmony without honesty is fragile. Men may enjoy the lack of tension, yet they often sense that something real is missing. What's missing is the truth of who you are and what you require. Conflict is not the enemy of connection, avoidance is. Healthy conflict reveals values, priorities, and emotional maturity. When you suppress disagreement to keep things pleasant, you deprive the relationship of depth. Men often respect women who can express dissatisfaction calmly because it shows emotional strength and self-awareness. Niceness-driven conflict. Avoidance teaches men that your discomfort is manageable, even ignorable. If every issue is softened, delayed, or dismissed, he learns that problems resolve themselves without his involvement. This creates emotional passivity. He does not need to reflect, adjust, or grow because there is no immediate feedback challenging his behavior. Avoiding conflict often means swallowing resentment. You tell yourself it's not worth bringing up, that you're being understanding, that you don't want to ruin the mood. But resentment does not disappear, it accumulates. Men may feel the emotional distance without understanding its source, leading to confusion and disengagement rather than closeness. When niceness prevents confrontation, communication becomes indirect. Hints replace statements. Silence replaces honesty. Men generally respond better to directness than subtlety. When your needs are implied instead of expressed, they are easily missed or misunderstood. This gap erodes emotional safety on both sides. Conflict avoidance also signals fear of abandonment. When a man senses that you are afraid to express dissatisfaction, he may unconsciously feel more powerful in the dynamic. Power imbalances rarely lead to respect. Respect thrives in relationships where both people feel free to speak without fear. Many women equate conflict with drama, but conflict handled with calmness is not drama, it is leadership. It guides the relationship forward. Men often respect women who can address issues without emotional chaos because it shows regulation and confidence. Niceness that avoids conflict removes this guiding force. Avoiding conflict can also distort your self-image. You begin to see yourself as easygoing and adaptable while internally feeling unheard and unseen. This internal split weakens your sense of self. Men are drawn to women who are integrated, where thoughts, feelings, and actions align. When you finally speak up after long silence, the intensity often surprises him. What feels sudden to him has been building quietly within you. This is why conflict avoidance leads to blow-ups rather than resolution. Niceness delays the inevitable instead of preventing it. Men respect boundaries that are spoken, not hoped for. Conflict is often the moment where boundaries are articulated. When you avoid these moments, boundaries remain invisible. Invisible boundaries cannot be respected because they were never clearly defined. Avoiding conflict also limits intimacy. True intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability includes expressing disappointment, frustration, and unmet needs. Niceness keeps interactions surface level, where emotions are filtered and curated rather than shared authentically. Men often grow through relational friction. Friction highlights blind spots and invites change. When niceness removes friction, growth stalls. A man may remain emotionally immature not because he is incapable, but because nothing requires him to evolve. Conflict handled respectfully builds trust. It shows that disagreement does not equal abandonment. When you avoid conflict, you reinforce the fear that honesty threatens connection. This fear keeps both people emotionally guarded, even if things appear calm. Niceness that IDS conflict prioritizes short-term comfort over long-term stability. Comfort feels good in the moment, but stability requires truth. Men respect women who are willing to risk discomfort for authenticity because authenticity signals strength. When you stop avoiding conflict, you reclaim your voice. Your words gain weight because they are no longer diluted by fear. Men respond differently to women who speak with conviction rather than caution. Avoiding conflict teaches men that peace matters more to you than self-respect. Addressing conflict teaches them that self-respect is non-negotiable, and self-respect is the foundation upon which genuine respect from others is built. The moment you stop being nice, everything shifts because the dynamic that once relied on your accommodation begins to reorganize itself. Niceness often functions as emotional glue, holding unstable connections together by absorbing imbalance. When that glue is removed, the true structure of the relationship is revealed. Men respond not to words, but to changes in energy, and the absence of over-accommodation is immediately felt. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, silence replaces persuasion. This silence is not withdrawal, it is self-respect. Men are accustomed to women filling emotional gaps with reassurance and clarification. When that pattern stops, it creates a pause. In that pause, men either step forward with intention or step away due to lack of investment. The shift begins internal. You no longer anticipate his needs at the expense of your own. This internal reorientation changes your posture, tone, and presence. Men sense this change before it is ever verbalized. Confidence does not announce itself, it is perceived. When you stop being nice, your reactions become aligned with your values. You no longer laugh at what hurts you or agree with what diminishes you. This alignment creates emotional consistency. Men respond to consistency with either respect or retreat. Both outcomes clarify the truth of the connection. Men who benefited from your niceness may resist the shift. Resistance often appears as confusion, guilt-tripping, or accusations of change. This resistance is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that the previous dynamic served them more than it served you. When you stop overgiving, your energy becomes scarce. Scarcity draws attention. Men who were passive may become more attentive because the emotional safety net has been removed. Attention often increases when access is no longer guaranteed. The removal of niceness exposes effort levels. When you are no longer compensating for his lack of consistency, the imbalance becomes visible. Men who are capable will rise to meet the new standard. Men who are not will drift away. This separation is natural and necessary. When you stop being nice, communication becomes more intentional. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. Men listen differently when they sense that your RDs are not driven by fear of loss, but by self-respect. Men often test the new dynamic subtly. They may delay, withdraw, or push boundaries to see if the old patterns return. When you remain calm and consistent, the test ends. Consistency signals that the change is permanent. As niceness fades, clarity increases. You no longer tolerate ambiguity disguised as potential. Men are forced to define their intentions through action. Undefined connections struggle to survive without emotional cushioning. When you stop being nice, your standards become visible. Visible standards create structure. Structure either attracts disciplined behavior or repels those seeking ease. Men respect structure because it mirrors competence and self-leadership. Men who value you will adjust. Adjustment may take time, but effort follows recognition. When a man realizes that access to you requires presence and respect, he becomes more deliberate. Men who relied on your niceness for validation or convenience may disengage. This disengagement is often mistaken for loss, but it is actually release. What leaves was never aligned with your value. When you stop being nice, you stop negotiating your worth. Negotiation implies doubt. Certainty removes the need for discussion. Men respect certainty because it reduces emotional manipulation and confusion. Your emotional state stabilizes as you stop over-functioning. Stability is attractive because it creates emotional safety without dependency. Men respond to women who are emotionally grounded rather than emotionally accommodating. When niceness ends, authenticity begins. You are no longer performing for acceptance. Performance creates exhaustion. Authenticity creates magnetism. Men sense when a woman no longer needs them to feel whole. This independence shifts attraction from comfort to curiosity. Curiosity fuels pursuit. The relationship either deepens or dissolves. Depth requires mutual effort. Dissolution removes imbalance. Both outcomes restore alignment. When you stop being nice, you reclaim your time, energy, and voice. These reclaimed resources change how you show up everywhere, not just in relationships. Men do not miss niceness, they miss access. When access is no longer free, respect becomes the currency. The shift is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, firm, and consistent. And in that quiet firmness, everything rearranges itself around yourself, respect. This is not a call to become cold, harsh, or unloving. It is a call to stop betraying yourself in the name of being liked. When you release the habit of overgiving, over-explaining, and over-accommodating, You make space for relationships that are built on mutual effort rather than quiet endurance. The right men will not be intimidated by your boundaries or your clarity, they will be guided by them. And those who disappear were only ever attached to your niceness, not your worth. When you choose self-respect over approval, you don't lose love, you finally create the conditions for it to exist.